1976, Christmas morning. A 7-year-old British boy unwraps his present. It's a chemistry set. Not a toy chemistry set, a real one. Inside the box, sulfuric acid, potassium nitrate, magnesium strips, and a Bunsen burner. The instruction manual includes experiments like creating small explosions and making your own gunpowder. His parents smile. They bought it from Woolworths. It cost £3. There's no safety warning, no age restriction, no protective equipment included. Just chemicals and fire. This wasn't illegal. This wasn't underground. This was marketed directly to children on British television, sold in every high street shop, and given as gifts by loving parents who had no idea what they were handing their kids. This is the story of shocking British toy ads from the 1970s that promoted products so dangerous, owning them today, would result in criminal charges. Let's start with the most infamous, Clackers. If you grew up in Britain in the early 70s, you remember these. 2 hard acrylic balls on a string. You held the string and swung the balls so they smacked together above and below your hand. The faster you went, the louder the clack. British toy companies marketed them as the ultimate skill toy. TV ads showed kids clacking away, grinning. What the ads didn't show? The balls shattering. Because they did. Constantly. Acrylic under repeated impact fractures. And when clackers broke, they exploded. Shards of plastic flew into kids' faces, eyes, arms. By 1971, British hospitals were treating dozens of children per week for clacker-related injuries. Some kids lost vision permanently. The government banned them in 1973, but the ads kept running until 75. Toy shops kept selling old stock. Thousands of British kids were injured because nobody wanted to admit the product was fundamentally dangerous. Then there were the lawn darts. Americans called them jarts. In Britain, they were marketed as garden javelin sets. The ads showed families playing in sunny gardens, mums, dads, kids. The game? Throw heavy metal-tipped darts across the lawn into a target ring. The darts weighed half a pound each. The tips were sharpened steel, and the ads marketed them to children as young as 6. One 1978 commercial showed a boy, maybe 8 years old, hurling a dart 30 feet. The tagline, "Test your aim, build your strength." What they didn't mention? Lawn darts killed people. In 1977, a 5-year-old British girl died after a lawn dart punctured her skull during a family barbecue. Her brother had thrown it. It went over the fence. She was playing in the neighbor's garden. The dart came down like a missile. She died instantly. It took until 1989 for Britain to ban lawn darts. By then, dozens of children had been hospitalized. 3 had died. Let's talk about the chemistry sets. Not the modern ones with baking soda and food coloring. The real ones. In the 1960s and 70s, British companies like Salter Science and Merit sold chemistry sets containing genuinely hazardous substances. We're talking concentrated acids, toxic metals, flammable compounds. One popular set included sodium metal, which explodes on contact with water. Another included potassium permanganate and glycerin, which, when mixed, spontaneously combust. The TV ads showed boys in ties and lab coats performing experiments in their bedrooms. The voiceover said, "Become a real scientist at home." There were no safety goggles included, no gloves, no ventilation instructions, just chemicals in a booklet. British parents bought these by the thousands. And British kids? They burned themselves, poisoned themselves. One boy in Manchester in 1974 mixed the wrong chemicals and created chlorine gas. He was hospitalized for a week. The toy company's response? Follow the instructions properly. Now the cap guns and realistic toy weapons. In the 1970s, British toy guns looked real. Not kind of real, identical to actual firearms. One ad from 1976 showed a boy holding a replica Colt revolver, indistinguishable from the genuine article. It was metal, weighted, and fired caps that sounded like real gunshots. The tagline, "Feel like a real cowboy." Another ad featured a replica machine gun that made authentic firing sounds. Kids played with these in parks, on streets, in public. And British police? They couldn't tell the difference. In 1979, a 14-year-old boy in Birmingham was nearly shot by armed police after pointing his toy gun at a passing car as a joke. The officers thought it was real. The boy survived. Barely. It wasn't until the 1980s that Britain mandated toy guns be brightly colored. But for a decade, British children played with weapons that looked lethal. And the ads encouraged it. Then there was the Sky Dancer. This one's from the 90s, but it's too dangerous not to include. Sky Dancers were fairy dolls with foam wings. You put the doll on a launcher, pulled a string, and the doll spun into the air like a helicopter. The ads showed girls smiling as their sky dancers soared gracefully. Reality? The dolls were projectiles. They flew unpredictably. Into faces, into walls, into eyes. The wings were hard foam reinforced with wire. When a sky dancer hit you, it hurt. By 1996, over 100 British children had been injured. Broken teeth, scratched corneas, concussions. One girl in Leeds needed stitches after a sky dancer hit her in the forehead. The company Galoob eventually recalled 9 million units worldwide. But the British ads kept running until the recall was announced. Parents kept buying them. Kids kept getting hurt. Let's talk about creepy crawlers. This was a toy oven that let kids make rubber insects by pouring liquid plastic into molds and heating them. Sounds fine, right? Except the oven reached temperatures of 200 degrees Celsius, and it had no automatic shutoff. British ads in the 70s showed children using creepy crawlers unsupervised. The voiceover said, "Make your own monsters." What they didn't say, the liquid plastic, called Plastigoop, released toxic fumes when heated. Fumes that caused headaches, nausea, and respiratory issues, and the molds scalding hot. Kids burned their hands constantly. One British safety report from 1977 documented over 300 injuries from creepy crawlers in a single year. Burns, poisoning, chemical exposure. The toy stayed on shelves until the early 80s. Why? Because it sold. And selling mattered more than safety. Now the water-based toys that weren't water-safe. One ad from 1975 promoted an inflatable pool raft for kids. It looked fun, colorful, big enough for 2 children. The ad showed kids laughing, floating in a garden pool. What the ad didn't mention, the raft had no safety valves. If it deflated instantly, and it did, frequently. In 1978, a 6-year-old boy drowned in a public pool in Blackpool after his raft deflated beneath him. He couldn't swim. His parents were 10 feet away. By the time they reached him, he was underwater. He survived, but with brain damage. The toy company never pulled the product. They added a small disclaimer on the box. Adult supervision recommended. That was it. Another toy, the Aqua Leisure Baby Boat, was an inflatable seat for toddlers. The ad showed babies floating happily. In reality, the seat frequently tipped over, plunging babies face first into water. Multiple drownings, multiple lawsuits. It wasn't banned until 2009. Let's talk about the swing wing. This was a backyard toy, a metal swing set with a wing attachment that let kids swing in a circular motion. The British ads showed children spinning joyfully, laughing. What they didn't show, the swing wing was a centrifuge. If you swung too fast, centrifugal force launched you off, and the swing was metal. Heavy, hard metal. Kids flew off mid-spin and hit the ground, or worse, hit the metal pole. Concussions were common. Broken bones were common. One boy in Scotland in 1977 was killed when he swung too fast, flew off, and struck his head on the central pole. The force fractured his skull. He died in the hospital 2 days later. The toy stayed on the market for another decade. Why? Because British safety regulations didn't require testing for foreseeable misuse. If the kid used it wrong, it was the kid's fault. Here's the horrifying pattern. Almost every one of these toys was advertised the same way. Happy kids, sunny gardens, smiling parents. The ads made the toys look safe, fun, innocent. They didn't mention the hospitals. They didn't mention the injuries. They didn't mention the deaths. And British parents, trusting, loving parents, bought them. Because why wouldn't they? These were sold at Woolworths, Hamleys, Argos. They were on TV during children's programming. They had bright packaging and cheerful mascots. How could they be dangerous? But they were. They were so dangerous that today, owning some of them, like lawn darts or original chemistry sets, is illegal in Britain. Selling them is a criminal offense. And yet, for decades, they were marketed directly to children. The most disturbing part? The companies knew. Internal documents released through lawsuits show that toy manufacturers were aware of injury reports. They knew kids were getting hurt, but they also knew that recalls were expensive. Redesigns were expensive. Lawsuits could be settled quietly. So they kept selling. They kept advertising. And British children kept getting injured. Some were permanently disabled. Some died. And the ads? They kept showing happy kids. Because the goal wasn't safety. The goal was profit. This is what Britain looked like 50 years ago. This is what we gave our children. And the saddest part? Most of us didn't know. We trusted the ads. We trusted the brands. We trusted that if it was on TV, if it was in the shops, it must be safe. We were wrong.